the Lord really revealed to me the essence of what it means to live a Christian life, at least the beginning of that. I'm going to put you in a position of influence over these other young men. What are you going to do with that? If you can recognize it, if you can say, okay, I know right now I am wandering in the desert, it's a much different perspective because that's actually ordained. The Lord has done that to almost everyone. It's not just you.
Good afternoon and welcome again to another episode of Legacy Men's Podcast. My name is Gary Trevor, your host, and my co-host, Jason Gonzalez.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Legacy Men's Podcast. Here we learn how to live and leave a godly legacy. Thank you so much for subscribing and sharing this content with others. Today we have Alex Arreguin here with us. Gary, will you let us know a little bit about Alex's background and education?
Absolutely. So Alex is an esteemed professor at one of our local colleges in Mesa, born in Mexico, came out to the United States when he was 6 with his family, happily married for 21 years, has got 2 beautiful children, and loves the Lord. And I would really ask
Amen.
that you would listen to this man, because now we deal with a whole cultural difference, since he has the background of being born in Mexico, and they still visit back and forth as well. So thank you, Alex, for coming in this afternoon. We appreciate it muchly. So talk to us about your birth in Mexico, when you came out to, I believe it was Los Angeles, and kind of fill us into that part as well.
I remember very little in terms of those first 5, 6, 7 years, being in Mexico. We didn't have a lot of money. That I remember. My dad didn't finish high school, and neither did my mom. And so my dad was a mechanic early in those years in Mexico. And, but the one thing that even in those early, really formative years, I do remember them sending me to not the local school, but my mom would drive, or we'd get in the bus, drive 45 minutes to a private preschool, a private, elementary or kindergarten at that particular junction. Yeah.
And so then apparently you went into, your parents also paid for you to go to a Catholic set of schools. So basically elementary through high school, correct?
Yeah. I didn't know at the time that what they were doing, they were really kind of setting this foundation that for them, education was always the key to a good life, right? To improve my life, I needed to take education seriously. And so at an early age, they were always sacrificing everything just so that I could, I was successful in my academics, right? And so for them, it was always a sacrifice to send me to private schools, but that's what they were really wanting to do.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question because Gary, you just asked so many great questions about the Hispanic culture, right? The Latin culture.
Right.
And so you're born in Mexico. Around the age of 7 is when your parents came out to the States. And I'm firstborn, next generation Gonzalez, right? My parents are from Guatemala. And why did your parents come out here to the States? Why did they move to LA?
I think it's probably very similar to why a lot of people still come here. And part of it is they just saw that this was a ticket to a better life. Not necessarily even for themselves, to be quite honest with you, but for me. Because though their life certainly improved when they got here, they were always looking at that next generation, which was me. And I think so for them, it wasn't just their ticket out for them to improve financially, but it was really they saw that this was their opportunity to pass on to me and put me in a position where my life was simply going to be a little bit better, a little bit more successful, perhaps a little bit more content, right, than their life, less struggle. And so that was, I think, probably the number one, the driving reason why they left. And they left a lot behind. They left at that particular time. Both my grandparents were still alive, right? And so I look back on that and I think about, gosh, what would it take for me right now in my stage in life to simply pick up and go to another country?
Yeah.
Not even for my benefit, but for the benefit of my kids.
Right.
That's wild to me to
Yeah.
think about, that you would just pick up and move like
I
that.
just think it's so cool. I mean, generationally, whether you're Latino or South African, English, whatever that is, wherever you were born, at some point in time, someone made a decision to do that for those next generations, and this starts spilling into your faith and all that good stuff, which I wanted to get to later. But the part where you're saying they provided that, just in the meantime, they were your dad was a mechanic, right? So I'm sure there was some tough times there, just kind of working with his hands and putting in the work every single day. And your mom was a secretary. She left that in Mexico and then came here and was cleaning offices and worked in a fast food restaurant, which is reality for a lot of people that just go up from their countries. They leave whatever they were doing as their career. And then they come here and do some jobs that some individuals really don't want to do. So I wanted to highlight that because it's like you're saying, they're not really doing it for themselves. They're doing it for those next generations that may have that opportunity to take advantage of all the different things that this country has to offer, which I'm grateful for.
Amen.
Yeah.
The firstborn carries tremendous weight, and the parents play tremendous leverage on them as well. So in essence, they were bringing you out here. They were committing 100% to you, even though you had a very younger brother, 7 years your junior. You were the person they were investing everything on. Is that always been a cultural thing? And how did that weigh on you, knowing you were basically carrying a lot of your parents' responsibility? And truth, as you told us, because they didn't speak English fluently, you had to intercede on their behalf on many transactions, including down the road when you had to, I think, file for Chapter 11 as well. Mm-hmm. How did that weigh on you as a young man, Alex?
Yeah, that was the weight of the responsibility of a firstborn Mexican son was something that through the course of my life, it was something that definitely was a heaviness, right? It added a heaviness to my life because there was a responsibility that I felt to my parents because they had sacrificed so much. They had invested so much in just coming out here.
Right.
That I had to be a success. Otherwise, I would have looked at them and they might have thought to themselves, we did this for what? Because look what he has done with his life, right? And so that awareness was something that has become more and more a reality for me as I've gotten older. And maybe some of that comes with maturity, right? But I felt that early on. And some of that, I've always felt a sense of responsibility to them because of that initial move to come out here. But yeah, early on, I was, that responsibility fell on me because I learned the language so quickly. And kids do. They just learn languages very, very quickly once they move into and become part of that, those communities and that culture. So for me, that I did that, which in turn put me in a position to always have to be the translator for the family. And the translator in pretty adult things, right? As you mentioned, first when they bought their first house, it was a condo. I was the one that was sitting down with the real estate agent at the ripe age of probably 12. And I'm sitting there having conversations about what this document means and what this document means to my parents. And I hardly understand what the legal documents mean in English, let alone trying to translate that back to to Spanish. So you can imagine that. But yeah, when they lost their house subsequent years later, I had to do that again, right? And then I remember sitting there with them in court with the judge, talking to them about making wiser financial decisions, and then trying to translate that as well. So early on, there was a lot of, I was put in positions where it was mostly by necessity at that time for them. They put me in a position where I had to intercede on their behalf and be there for them. But that really, in many ways now, I look back, that was really preparing me for there was a cultural expectation that I had to live up to,
right.
And so, so that is something that I used to struggle with, because one of the differences that I love about the United States is that here you're judged on you.
Yep.
not on your family, not on what they did.
Correct.
But at the same time, I do have an affinity to my family. I do owe them something that perhaps is lost in American culture. And so when I talk to other men, especially that are perhaps they have problems with their in-laws and so forth, or problems in their own family, and I think it's very easy for some people to just say, you know what, I'm going to take care of my immediate family, my wife, my kids, and anything outside of that, it doesn't bother me. And I've tried that. I can't do that. The presence of my family is of my mother, and before my father passed away, that's a big presence for me, and I do owe them a responsibility.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things that you said about the looking back at it and the learning process of it is that in the time, it may not look like it's something that's benefiting you, right? Having to go in there and doing all that translating and looking up all this different information that you're unaware, but it made you resourceful. So the Lord, like you said, was kind of putting you in positions to prepare you for a later stage. And that also taught you a lot of leadership qualities later on that you now use today with your marriage and with your kids and even in ministry, which is really cool. As far as the cultural aspects of it, I mean, my wife is Filipino and Spanish, and even on the Filipino side, I've noticed, they do stick together a lot. They still have those, family reunions and gatherings, and I look at that and I'm like, man, that's, that is something that here, because my family's not here, they're in Guatemala, we don't do a lot of, right? We still do it with my immediate family, but definitely something to learn from if you're interested in learning about different cultures and stuff like that. I know a ton of people. I mean, Arizona is a hotbed for everybody's from somewhere else. I mean, you see this in church too, but it's just inviting people over for meals and just sharing all the different music that you listen to, the different meals that you cook from the different places that you're from. It's just so much fun to learn about different people's cultures.
Yeah, it is.
But then also just, having that sense of that community that you can continue to hold and have with whether it be your family or friends, which is really neat. Yeah, Gary?
The thing that really impressed me when talking to you was they put you in a Christian college called Westmont in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara's not cheap. And your father took out all his 401k. Walk us through that experience in Westmont College, because at the time you weren't a Christian, but you got into some very interesting scenarios that really helped you through that. So kind of share with us the Westmont experience in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, Westmont is absolutely very expensive. And so at that time, I had no awareness of what my parents were doing financially in the background to allow me to go to Westmont. And a matter of fact, even prior to that, when I went to a private high school, I had no idea that in the background, my parents were meeting with the financial office at the high school and making payment plans and leveraging this, leveraging that. I mean, there were so many things that were happening that my teenage self and then early into my 20s, I had no idea about, that they were doing just to get me through the private education.
Right.
But Westmont, I think, was the place where the Lord really revealed to me the essence of what it means to live a Christian life, at least the beginning of that. Prior to that, for me, growing up Catholic, for me, a Christian life or a religious life meant following a list of rules to do or not to do, right? And probably the best example of that is the Ten Commandments, right? It's pretty clear. And so I followed those simply because it seemed easy. I can check those things off, right? But prior to Westmont, I also, and something we talked about, right? I also saw God as definitely a presence, but a very distant presence. I would pray to God somewhere above, and I knew I had been to church enough and to Mass enough to know and respect the essence of who he was. But when I got to Westmont, it was as if God came down from that cloud that I always pictured him in. And it was the first time that I was able to really see God in my life, with walking alongside me. And I had never seen that before, because for us growing up, religion was the thing that you did if you went to church on Sundays, or at best, sometimes if you were to go to Easter Mass or on Christmas, then you behaved, then you acted like like a good believer. But outside of that, there was very little manifestation of my faith or anyone else's faith in action. So when I got to Westmont, all of a sudden, for the first time, it's a small college. It's got 1,200 students, and it's hidden up in the hills of Montecito. So it is filled with, about, of those 1,200 students, probably I would say about 1,100 of them are Christian. Wow. Strong Christian.
Yep.
Wow.
And I'm a deer in the headlights. I walk into Westmont, and I really, to be honest with you, I felt like I had no business being there, because all of a sudden I was seeing these people my age that were not faking it. Not faking it. Really, I thought to myself, wow, you really believe in this stuff. And I was beginning to see the Lord was bringing people into my life that were showing me, this is the essence of a Christian life. This is the essence of this, right? And
this was at 19, right? Mm-hmm. And so this cracked me up, because you're talking about how you get to this place and it's just like, so you're talking about like, and it's not just all Catholicism, it's nothing, about, we're not knocking, what the religion is, but what you noticed was that they were like, oh, we're going to church tonight, and like, we've got this thing on Wednesday. Oh, we're going to church again. And it's like, oh, it's our Sunday thing. Oh, it's our Sunday afternoon. Oh, it's our Sunday worship night. And you're like, no. Like, no, this is me time. Like, this is not mandatory. But and then talk to us about the girl that called you out.
Yeah, well, these people were just living for Christ. And I didn't know what that even meant, right? But yeah, it was just every social gathering was Christ related. And it took me a long time to understand and to actually want to be there, part of it, right? But yeah, I mean, I was, became friends with this, with this girl, and I thought, prior to this, you like someone, they like you, why not start dating? And I remember when I finally asked her if she was interested, she said to me, Alex, I do like you, but you're not nearly as mature in your faith as where I would want you to be. And I mean, I didn't know what to do with that. What? Okay. Like, I go to church. I'm here. I don't understand what you mean by not, right? And so that really shocked me, because it was, for the first time, someone in this, otherwise, dating can be a very secular thing.
Yep.
And it was the first time that someone interjected Christ into an area of my life that I had never invited him into, right? And that's really what it was. Westmont was an introduction to all these spaces. I think I certainly compartmentalized my faith a lot. And so I thought, all right, well, you know what? I can trust God in this. I can trust God in this area. But there are certain areas where stay out of my life. Dating as a teenager is one of those. And so for someone to interject that in was completely, mind-blowing for me. And that led me into the beginning of having many of those experiences, whether it was that or, for example, I was thinking, what job do I want, right, as I was getting ready to graduate. And, people kept saying, well, have you gone to the Lord? What are you good at? What has he gifted you in? And that was a very, very different, once again, this is my career. What are you talking about? What am I good? What is God? It's my career. I should do whatever I want to do. But people were continually asking, have you gone to the Lord on this? Have you sought wise counsel? All these things that just, now I understand what they mean, but back then it was all new.
Cool. I want to go back into a seed that was planted in you. And Gary, I'll let you take this.
No,
from
go ahead.
here. But 16 years old, you prayed the prayer. Go ahead, Gary.
So you prayed the prayer of salvation. And so what got you to that prayer?
a complete secular relationship, right? It was a girl that I started dating my freshman year in high school, and when we started to date, they were not a Christian, but during the course of our relationship, her family was brought to the Lord, and so all of a sudden, she was being asked to go to church with them. I was invited to go to church, and I did what most guys do, which is like, sure, whatever, I'll go wherever you want. If I want to date you, I got to do this. And so for probably a whole year, I went to on and off church with them, and was complete just, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? But it was worth it because then I got to hang out with her. But yeah, it was in between my sophomore and junior year that we were at a church service.
But what did she say to you? She said, what did she tell you that she had these restrictions on your relationship, that if this didn't materialize, this wouldn't happen?
Yeah.
Again, you're talking about a Christian lady who set parameters, who set boundaries, which is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, in high school, it was, it was this. She was basically saying, here, this is important to me. This is important to my family. And so if you want to be part of this, this is what you need to do, And once again, it wasn't me though, right? I was doing it for someone else. Mm-hmm. But as to your point, that was a seed mm-hmm. that the Lord was absolutely planting in that relationship. Amen. And they began to go to church. And then they were the ones, her and her family were the ones that said, well, have you ever thought about going to Christian college? No. What? Are you kidding me? No. Yeah. No. Yeah. And matter of fact, I think that the only reason my parents said yes to go to a Christian college is because it was private. It was a private college. So to them meant, that must be the next step to your education. So sure, go ahead and go to a Christian college.
Right.
So after this girl at that college told you weren't mature enough in your faith, so not just that, right? But she called you out on it. You did actually start focusing on your maturity, and you started doing some things at the college that I wanted you to kind of highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the first things, I started going to these social events that were all around Christ. So I did start doing that, right? I started going to some Bible studies that were during the week, different people at the college were hosting. And then, my junior year, there was an opportunity to be a resident assistant, which is in that case, I got my own room, but I was in charge of oversaw about 25 freshmen. And I think that was really kind of the first step into like, all right, Lord, here we go. I'm going to do something. I don't really know why I'm doing this, mm-hmm. But I'm going to do it anyway. But now all of a sudden it was like the first time the Lord was saying, I'm going to put you in a position of influence over these other young men. What are you going to do with that? And so that I was sure that I wanted to do that, but I had no idea how to do that. And the good news is that when you become a resident assistant, you are one of probably, let's say, 20 resident assistants. And all the other 19 resident assistants were just more mature than I was. And so that really led me to ask them, so what do you do? I mean, do we go drinking? Like, what do you do? And no, why don't you offer them if they want to do like an accountability group? Some of them may need an accountability partner. Why don't you do a Bible study for them? Why don't you go serve in Santa Barbara in the community? What? Right? So it was these young people, because the men and women that were, without even thinking of it, they were pouring into my life. I mean, you can see the Lord just picking these certain people. Here, Alex, and here's another person, and here's another person. I was drowning, right, in all these strong Christian examples that you couldn't help but mature into that. And it was because all of them, every day I was exposed to that by the time I finished my junior year, sure enough, I I definitely grew in that because I saw the responsibility that I had to other people. And I began to see my gifts being used by the Lord. And that was really kind of the first inkling that I had. Maybe I could do this thing. Maybe I could teach, you know. And I never thought that I would do that. But so another thing, my parents, they had a rule that they wanted me to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And that was the only reason they were going to pay. There was the only way that they were going to pay for my education. And so I had to double major because I didn't want to be a doctor, but they wanted me to be a doctor, so I had to major in biology. And they would look at all my grades in biology. But at some point I realized I like reading and I like writing. So I wanted to major in English. So I double majored, right? But my junior year came around and I realized, I don't know what, I cannot be a doctor. I can't do it. And so I took a trip with the college. We went on a semester abroad. And there, it's 20 of us, and it was a program where it was only for English majors. We were in Italy and we were in England, right? And here's a kid, I don't have money outside of what my parents are pouring into this. I don't know how my parents afforded it, right? But I'm over there and I remember seeing these people their senior year having conversations about what's next. What does the Lord want you to do? I remember one of my professors, was talking about that. And once again, it's like, okay, here's this thing, this area of most people's lives that you don't invite God into, which is, what is your career? My parents had answered that question for me, but it was the first time that the Lord might say something about that. Yeah. And when I came back from that trip, I knew, all right, I want to be in front of people. I think that's what He's gifted me at. And so the rest is history. I've been teaching for 25 years.
Yeah, that's cool. I wanted to get your wife in, without fast forwarding too much, but I did want to get to your father passing as well, because I think that's something we have to talk about. But with your wife, you then met her, and you actually posed the question to her about whether or not she was, ready and mature in her faith, and that you were very serious about taking a step, but that it was going to be kind of like I'm not looking to date too many people. I'm looking to get serious, right?
Yeah.
And you had your two children as well, both daughters, right? Alexis and Gabriella. Leading in the church, so now you're actually teaching in the church, which is really cool. I believe it's which ministry is it?
Young Families.
Young Families. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And then let's talk a little bit about your father, because there's just some things there that, and again, it's not about which religion, right? Like but your parents are Catholic, they've been Catholic for a while, but through your journey, you were actually able to speak life into your father right before he passed. Can you kind of walk us through that? I know that was about 2 years ago, and it a little bit painful still, but if you could walk us through that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my father, I think if I can characterize my father, he was probably the most hardworking man I've ever met in my life. And he was extremely, as I said, very resourceful. And with very limited education, mind you, right? And so from an early, all the way to, before he passed away, he instilled in me this, this work ethic and this, hey, you can do anything, right? And that was interesting too, because in some ways, when I became a Christian, that reliance on me, that reliance on you can do everything if you just work hard enough. Well, there was conflict, there was tension there, because I think that one of the things that I was being called by the Lord when He called me is, I need you to stop relying on yourself. And it took me a long time to really heed that, to listen to that, because I had seen evidence both in my father and my parents, but also in my own life, that I can do this life without the Lord. Maybe not my fullest life, but I can have an easy, successful life without the Lord. And so that was His influence. And so when He was coming towards the end of his life. He got to a point, because, death does this to us, where he could no longer save himself, right? There was no amount of, well, I just take another job, or I'll work extra hard, or I'll work long hours. There's nothing you can do, and he knew that, and I remember seeing him in that state, and over the last about a month and a half of his life, I could see a sense of searching and desperation. There's an openness to him that I'd never seen before. And for the first time, I thought, okay, this is now my turn to tell him about my Heavenly Father.
Praise God.
And sure, it was probably about 3 or 4 weeks before he passed away that I was visiting at their house, and I was sitting in bed with him talking, and he was hungry. He wasn't eating much at that time, so I was going to go get some food for him. But it was one of those moments where the Lord is speaking to you. I got up, but I could not leave the room, because I knew the Lord saying, right now, I have set the conditions in the heart for you to now pray.
Thank you, Jesus.
And so I said, oh, okay, Dad, and I'm trembling because I've prayed that prayer, and in English, I've seen my girls pray that prayer, to become Christians themselves. But here now, it's my father who is the one that's supposed to be leading me into these moments, and now I'm being asked to lead him, and then now to all of a sudden say this in Spanish for him as well. So there's a lot there where these, my life and his life and the influence of our culture and my influence of my Christian life were coming together. And so it was a privilege to sit down with him and lead him into that prayer. I think that was, my brother and my mother were able to witness that. And so I think that is, I do believe that set, that planted a seed in them.
What did you say that his heart was susceptible to hearing or conditioned?
Yeah, I think that I really felt like, the Lord was preparing, he had prepared his heart.
Yeah, that's really cool. So just to kind of close out here with you today, you said something that was really cool, and Gary, I think you picked up on this one too when we were meeting with Alex. It was how many times we are asked to pick up and move. Like the Lord calls us to go do some things, whether it be in the instance, right, like he did for you to go pray with your father, and or just other things where you were driving your father to and from the hospital over and over again. So that conditioning piece was you serving your father in a way, right? At the end of his life, battling cancer, doing the right thing and being there for him. And that helped for the Lord to be able to condition his heart, to be open to accepting him as his Lord and Savior before he passed, which is just amazing. And then we talked a little bit about the foreign lands. So, being born in Mexico, and then almost just throughout the entire journey of your family kind of changing the course, and then now being in this Christian faith, right, with your family, leading your marriage that way. It's just so cool that it's foreign lands and deserts that you kind of basically traveled through, right? And you said it as figuratively and literally, right, which is really neat. So wanted to thank you, Gary. Did you want to?
Yeah, so that's beautifully said. But I think we do have deserts and we do have grasslands that we go through. But the fact that you took the opportunity to grow through that and the Lord sustained you through that is absolutely marvelous. As Jason and I normally do at the end, if you could just share briefly some nuggets from your vast experience with dealing with all these different varieties of your life, what would you share with men right now that you would encourage them to take from your life?
Well, I think it's related to this idea of deserts. If you look at Scripture, almost, and certainly in the Old Testament, you see examples after examples of this. Anyone who has done anything for Christ, there was a moment in their life, and many moments after, but certainly a moment where the Lord said to them, pick up and move.
Yeah.
And I think that that is an example for all of us, but specifically for men. We are called to lead. We're called to lead our families, right? And so I think for men, one of the things that I would say is you're going to get that call. That's no question.
Yeah.
Whether that call is you are about to go into a desert, geographic desert, because I'm asking you to move and pick up your family. Or sometimes you're going to be called into a desert where it's financial crisis in your home. You're going to be led to a desert where everything is falling apart in your marriage, and you've never been in this emotional, psychological desert. So you're going to get called. My encouragement is, what can you do right now to prepare yourself for that?
Yeah.
I think another thing I would say related is that if you're preparing yourself, pray to the Lord that he will allow you to recognize when you're in that desert. Because if you can recognize it, if you can say, okay, I know right now I am wandering in the desert, it's a much different perspective because that's actually ordained. The Lord has done that to almost everyone. It's not just you.
That's right.
So recognize it. And then I think that as I've gotten older, my goal is now to use God's wisdom to learn how to anticipate when those deserts are coming. And that's for my family. My promise to my family is, I don't know what's around the corner of our lives. I don't know that. But my prayer, or my promise to them is, I promise you that I'm just going to pray that the Lord gives me the wisdom to know that there is something coming around that corner. There's a desert over there. And I think that the life of a Christian man it culminates in understanding and anticipating when those deserts are coming, because then you can prepare your family and everyone for it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Amen.
much.
Awesome. So Alex Arreguin here with us. Thank you very much for joining us. Guys, please don't forget to subscribe, share this content with your friends and family. We're there on Spotify if you want to check us out there and hear us out. Thank you very much for joining us, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Blessings 100-fold. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next time on the Legacy Men's podcast.
I had my questioning, searching period my first few years, in my walk with Christ. And then it became, I gave my heart over truly, finally. But it was still a lot was me focused, me and my relationship focused. But where it's really taken off and become more exciting and just more fruitful is actually putting it into practice of becoming the church and getting more involved. Actually going to the men's groups, getting to know guys, getting out of my comfort zone and teaching, which I've never done before, things like that. But the amount of men I meet and talk to that are all going through so many of the same struggles, and are coming at life with the same, maybe not the same stronghold I had from fourth grade, but when you look at it, so many men are they're living off of the insecurities from when they were a teenager.
Right.